GDPR Awareness and Training. This brief course is for all staff. The brief training course will show you all you need to know about GDPR. Once you've completed the course, your employer will be able to show to the information regulator that they have met the basic requirements for staff training. It'll take about 5 or 6 minutes to go through the course. Data protection is nothing new. There are existing laws about protecting personal data that we already have to comply with. But what is new is the growth in the way we process information in the digital world: computers, networks, social media, and many other places. The GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, addresses that change. The GDPR defines what we can and cannot do with individuals' personal data. Personal data means data that could identify someone, and that could be to directly identify somebody, for example, their email address, or you can identify somebody indirectly. For example, you might say identify somebody as the woman who owns a black dog, drives a blue car, has medical conditions such and such, and lives in a certain street, and that data together can identify the individual. So it's not simply about name and address. The GDPR applies to everyone in the European Economic Area. It applies to all companies in the EEA that processes data about European citizens, residents, and also some others. It protects all our data and demands that companies have appropriate organizational and technical controls in place. Companies rely on all of us protecting personal data. It is all of our responsibilities, and you and I have to take care of anything that can identify someone. For example, details that can identify people include their name, age, job title, where they live, their marital status, what they look like, where they went to school, their employer, their financial details, their interests, their email addresses, their computer IP addresses, their web browsing, their mobile phone location details, and others. Some data is called special category data, and you have to take particular care of that. Those details include the medical details, information about somebody's religious, political, trade union views and details. It includes their sexual details and any genetic and biometric data that has been captured about that individual. All of this data is special category data that has to be particularly carefully controlled. The GDPR sets some specific rules about how we can process personal data, and it has in place some specific principles about the processing of data. So when we process data at work, we have to consider and make sure that we ask the data subject for consent for the processing of their data. We have to explain to them how their data will be used. We can only use the data for the purposes that we said we would use the data. We can only collect the minimum data that we need to do the job. And we have to delete the data once we have finished with it. We have to make sure the data is accurate, and we have to make sure that the data is protected. Eventually and ultimately, companies get compromised. We read in the press of companies that have been hacked, that have lost data. It is our responsibility to ensure that all real and suspected data breaches are reported to our company. The company then has 72 hours to report any real breach to the regulator. That 72 hours includes weekends, so it's really important that we inform our internal compliance team or our data protection officer of any real or suspected breach for personal data in whatever form. Some examples of data breaches that we could come across include emails being sent to the wrong person, personal details printed into documents and left in the wrong place, sensitive data not being redacted from documents, people losing a memory stick containing personal data, documents not being disposed of, laptops and mobile devices being stolen, computer systems being hacked, computer systems suffering from a virus, or perhaps somebody telling a colleague or a patient about their medical condition where other people can overhear, and there are other examples. So we'll look at a small number of examples to illustrate how we can protect personal data. So, for example, if you're a nurse and you have to tell a patient about their illness, some of the things that you might consider include: make sure you confirm the identity of the person you're speaking with, make sure no one else can overhear what you're saying, and when you have finished the consultation, make sure you take any notes and don't leave confidential information around. As a second example, imagine if you're a manager and you have interviewed someone but not offered them the job. In this case, we have to make sure that the data that we have kept about the person is correctly deleted. So, for instance, you might want to delete their CV or resume. You want to make sure that you delete the notes that you have made about them, and make sure that the data that you have kept is only kept for the period that you need to complete the processing of the job. And finally, let's consider that you're a receptionist, where visitors sign into the building. Some of the things that you might want to consider are: who else can read the visitor log? How long is the visitor log kept for? And things like, are visitors aware that there is CCTV in reception? That is the end of the course. Very brief overview into GDPR. Explain some of the principles of the General Data Protection Regulation and some of your obligations in protecting personal data.